Our chapter day book is Here If You Need Me, written by Kate Braestrup. We are on chapter 14. Mom, dude, Peter announced. I need you to drive me to Appleton. I bought drums. What are you talking about? Drums, Mom. He did a little Ringo Starr pantomime. You know, drums. Ned Rich says I can join his band. But you don't know how to play the drums, do you? Did he? I was racking my brain. There had been guitar lessons, karate class, a pretty Japanese tutor named Kyoko that Peter still considered his ideal woman, but I recalled no drums. Peter was giving me a look of pained condescension. I'm going to buy the drums and then I'm going to learn to play them, he said, enunciating clearly, as if communicating with a mental defective. This didn't sound like a particularly promising plan to me, but Peter had spent his own money on the project and he swore up and down he wouldn't play too loud or after 9 o'clock, and that he would stop immediately if our neighbor, Mrs. Pinkham, complained. So Peter and I drove to Appleton. Smiling with grim satisfaction, the parents of the drum's previous owner watched us load them into the back of my car. Over the next few months, I would periodically hear Peter banging away up in his room, and I'd yell, "Knock that off, 9:15. This was about the sum total of my contribution to Peter's musical career. About 6 months later, I was at a school function, something to do with congratulating the basketball team on a fine season. I think, lo and behold, there was Peter up on stage with his friends, and he was actually playing the drums. He's gotten really good, one of the mothers shouted at me above the amplified sound of the band Peter was now clearly part of. I didn't know your son could play so well. Well, I didn't know my son could play at all. It was one of the many discouraging moments of my single parenthood. God, I am such an awful parent, I thought. My son is playing drums in a rock and roll band, and he's damned good and obviously loves it, and I knew nothing about it. I was halfway home from the search for Betsy, the suicidal mother, thinking about Peter. I was driving along a road that winds through a salt marsh below the hamlet of Frankfort, when a duck flew up and over me, just clearing the car. The windshield wipers cleared an arc in time for me to glimpse its fawn-colored underbelly, the muscles in its eager breast working, its very orange feet treading the air. "Hello, duck!" I claimed aloud in the car, suddenly sensing in my own body its avian urgency, its terror and wild hope. And that was when, alone in the car, I finally began to cry. Lots of cops cry on the way home from scenes. Women officers cry more easily than men, not because they're weaker, but because for them, the release of tears is both socially and physiologically permitted at a lower level of distress. But men will admit, at least to their chaplain, that the driver's seat of their cruiser or truck is where they mourn those deaths that have found, for whatever reason, the chinks in the armor they otherwise maintain. Warden Robitaille told me that there was an infant safety seat in the car that Betsy left behind when she went off to die, for example. While I could look at Betsy's body, to this day it's not an image I shy away from, I refused to go and have a look at that infant seat. It was the mere idea of the infant seat that got me. That and the duck's eager orange feet. Oh, and the blue journal and the fact that I, the plucky widow, didn't even know that my son Peter could play the drums. These things made me cry that day. "At least we found her," Lieutenant Trisdell said of Betsy. "Don't I hate it when we never find the body? It doesn't happen often, but it does happen, and it eats at you." The warden service spent 5 long days coordinating a search through thick scrub woods, around Indian water, through people's backyards and farmyards, but the subject never turned up. He had been taking drugs, though what sort of drugs was never made completely clear. He didn't inject, his girlfriend insisted. She sat nervously on the storage box that served as a bench. We were in the overhead team's search and rescue trailer with the familiar laptops glowing blue, the search areas carefully marked out on the topographical maps Nate Robertson had installed. The girlfriend's tummy spilled out above the tight hip line of her jeans, exposing a recently pierced umbilicus. It looked irritated and red. Me and him, neither of us would ever inject. No way. She said it with a curious self-righteousness, as if the mode of delivery made all the difference in the moral standing of a junkie. It was bound to be a difficult search. A witness noted an erratic gait, queer expression when Jason staggered across her back lawn on his way to the woods beyond, and it is always difficult to predict what a drugged or otherwise neurologically impaired subject will do. On the other hand, given his involvement in the local illegal drug trade, fleeing the murderous intentions of a former business associate, his odd behavior might have been the result of a sheer and well-justified terror. Or he could have been putting on a show, faking his own disappearance and apparent demise so as to permanently escape the criminal charges that were pending. Or he could just be lost in the woods, for ordinary reasons unrelated to either his addictions or his line of work. You know, Nate said casually, resting one haunch on the corner of the computer desk, I've never really taken recreational drugs. None of us has, except for Reverend Braystrup here, and she doesn't remember much. Nate said it deadpan, and the girlfriend turned to look at me wide-eyed. I shrugged. I was young, I said, and Nate permitted himself a small smile. The thing is, it could really help us if we had a sense of what drugs he might have taken and what effect they might have on him. Like what? The girl asked suspiciously. You know, I'm not going to say anything that might get Jason in trouble. Jason's already in trouble. The last time anyone saw him, he was acting extremely disoriented and paranoid, and he looked sick. He's not going to be able to take good care of himself if he's out in the woods in that condition. Right now, we're not interested in a prosecution. Right now, we just want to find your boyfriend alive, as I'm sure you do. He wasn't injecting, the girlfriend assured us. Maybe speedballing, she said, glancing sideways at us as if to gauge our disapproval. I don't really know. I'm not his mother. Speedballing. That's what? Cocaine and heroin? Nate asked. So what do you think? You've seen him stoned before. Would he keep moving or conk out? Would he want another fix at some point, badly enough to come out of the woods to get it? Would he hallucinate? The girlfriend thought about it for a long moment while we waited. One time, she said, absently fingering the ring in her sore red navel, I thought I was like a glass of orange juice sitting on a counter. I mean, it was so real. And I was scared, like shitless, because someone could come and knock me over and everything would like spill out. Huh, said Nate. And was that from speedballing? I can't recall, the girlfriend admitted. Maybe acid. A warden peeked his head around the door and announced the arrival of a psychic. Nate shot me a look. I've got it, I said. The psychic had driven all the way from Waterville to inform us that Jason was being held against his will. Really? I said. By whom? I can't tell, the psychic said, frowning. Evil guys, though, for sure. She had dyed blonde hair and blue, ophthalmic eyes, accentuated with plenty of eyeshadow. The eyeshadow sparkled in the summer sun. Fish scales are used to make cosmetics shine, I remembered irreverently. Pigment, which makes lipstick red, is made from bug blood. The things we smear on ourselves without knowing it. They might be terrorists, the psychic was saying, like Arabian terrorists. And there's definitely some kind of construction site near the place where they've got them tied up, like big machinery, Plus, I'm getting a wicked strong sense about Connecticut. Connecticut. Yeah. You mean he's in Connecticut? He could be, unless he was born there or thinks about it a lot. I don't know, but I'm getting a strong feeling about Connecticut. I thought you people should know. I thanked her and went off to fetch some antibiotic ointment from the first aid kit in my truck. I offered it to the girlfriend for her infected belly button, but she declined. I'm into homeopathy, she said. It's more natural. The psychic is sure that he's being held against his will at a construction site in Connecticut, I told Nate. He snorted. Then the one thing we know for sure is that he isn't anywhere near any construction sites, and we can probably take the whole of southern New England out of the Bolo, be on the lookout, zone. What a relief. Has a psychic ever proved useful? I asked. Never. They are always, always, always wrong. And no matter how off the mark they are, it never seems to faze them. They keep showing up with their useless dreams and gut feelings and visions. I keep hoping that one of these so-called psychics might just be a citizen who actually has good information he or she doesn't want to come out with directly, right? Susie so-and-so has a suspicion about her peculiar Uncle Joe, but she doesn't want to piss off his family by naming him, so she'll say, "Oh, I had a dream that the victim was on a lobster boat with red gunwales," and hope will take her seriously enough to have a look at Joe's boat. So far, this theory hasn't played out in any search I've been part of. The psychics are always outsiders. They are always wrong. They upset and confuse the victim's family, and they make things harder. But I do let them have their say, just in case. Sure enough. You keep questioning me about what Jason's using, his girlfriend said angrily the next time Nate interviewed her. He's like a hostage. That lady said she works with cops all the time. Why aren't you guys working with her? You should be looking for Jason in Connecticut instead of screwing around here. Nate assured her that Jason's description had been distributed to law enforcement agencies throughout all New England, and that the Connecticut police would keep their eyes open. This whole search seems like a waste of time to me, she said disdainfully as she left. As it turned out, Jason never reappeared. Perhaps this was the one time a psychic got it right, and there's a terrorist cell in New London that has a drug dealer's abduction to answer for. While it was possible, as one of the more cynical wardens suggested, that Jason's girlfriend was deliberately playing the role of frantic loved one to cover his escape, I was inclined to believe her when she said tearfully, "I miss him so much. Why won't he come home?" "Oh, honey," I said, and after a while, she did, at least, let me put some bacitracin on her belly button. She thought she was a glass of orange juice and that someone was going to spill her, Nate reflected later, and my kids wonder why I'm so paranoid about drugs. The disappearance of the drug-addled young man was only the most obvious example of a tragedy with substance abuse at its root. Many, if not most, of the deaths I see are caused, at least in part, by drug or alcohol use. Here's a sobering personal statistic. In as many years, I have responded to 5 deaths of people who drowned in water shallow enough to stand in, had they only been sober enough to stand. I do not address root causes. I am, in the parlance of law enforcement, reactive rather than proactive. For the most part, I show up after an accident has happened. The skull has fractured, the lungs have filled with water, The end is near or nearing. If I were to address root causes, I would stand on a street corner in Augusta or Portland or Billerica, Massachusetts, home to a mysteriously large proportion of our outdoor recreation casualties, shouting these words in the tone and with the urgency of Bible blasters who bellow revelation from memory. Do not drink and swim. Do not drink and operate a boat, canoe, ATV, or snowmobile. Do not drink and attempt to work through your relationship issues. Do not drink. Don't drink, I tell my children. I am falling prey to one of the occupational hazards of the law enforcement parent. I'm paranoid. None of my kids is allowed to so much as look at a snowmobile or an ATV. I force them to wear helmets for everything I can think of. Bicycling, skiing, skateboarding, walking to the store. I watch them swim with a newly nervous eye, counting heads. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Over and over. And if I had my druthers, they'd wear personal flotation devices in the shower. I do this, even though the boys have grown taller and stronger than I am, and Ellie and Wooly are close behind. Tall, strong boys drown too. I've been there when they pull out the bodies, the muscled arms and knees bent at the drowner's characteristic angle, as if the strong boy died in the middle of a subaqueous genuflection. As my sons enter adolescence, I lecture them endlessly about drinking and drugs. The victim staggered into the water, fell over, and was too drunk to get to his feet, I tell him. That is a stupid way to die. Do you hear me? Don't die that way. Yeah. Peter, I insist, don't die. Mom, dude, Peter says, towering over me, hugging me around my head and crushing my ear affectionately to his sternum. I can hear his heart beating. Peace, Mom, dude, peace. That is the end of chapter 14.